Sorry to interrupt, but let's aim for 100 likes on this video. If this is your second or third time watching my content and you haven't subscribed yet, please do it. It really helps me out. Jin Huk asserts that they both embody a state of death yet alive, attributing those malevolent individuals as the culprits responsible for his demise. Abruptly, Hendrik begins to chuckle, eventually erupting into laughter, leaving Jin Huk and Vulcan to observe him in silence. Subsequently, Hendrik extends his apologies, affirming Jin Huk's correctness. A sudden transformation in Hendrik's demeanor transpires, marked by an earnest expression as he proclaims Jin Huk as the prophesied individual spoken of by Uriel. This declaration leaves Jin Huk startled, concealing his internal wonderment concerning whether wingless beings have already approached Hendrik. Hendrik proceeds to unsheath his sword, while expressing his anticipation for an impending confrontation. He articulates his intent to personally assess and scrutinize Jin Huk's commitment, questioning whether it is genuine or a mere charade, dubbing Jin Huk as the one who conspires against the divine will. Subsequently, Hendrik inquires about Jin Huk's identity. In response, Jin Huk unveils his countenance by removing his mask, introducing himself as Cha Jin Huk, bearing the epithet, the Death Star. Suddenly, an elderly gentleman exclaims, labeling Hendrik as a troublesome figure for revisiting this place. He questions whether Hendrik has yet to accomplish his initial purpose. Jin Huk, perplexed, inquires about the identity of the elderly man. Hendrik reveals him as the local blacksmith and the creator of his sword. The blacksmith confirms his role and chastises Hendrik for his return, given that he has already acquired the sword. He inquires about the reason for Hendrik's reappearance. Upon closer examination, Jin Huk discerns the old man as an Oni. The Oni observes the peculiar amalgamation of a spirit and a mythical being dwelling within a human and inquires about Jin Huk's identity. Jin Huk inquires of the elderly gentleman how he had managed to survive, to which the old man, somewhat displeased, brands Jin Huk as a disrespectful scoundrel lacking reverence for his elders. He brusquely challenges Jin Huk to air any grievances he might have. Jin Huk clarifies his intent, seeking to know how the old man had endured that calamity. Suddenly, the Oni's countenance shifts to one of gravity, and he poises himself to strike Jin Huk with his mallet, convinced that Jin Huk was the arsonist responsible for his village's devastation. However, Hendrik intervenes, restraining the Oni's hand. The Oni, tears glistening in his eyes, implores Hendrik to release him, asserting that Jin Huk had set his village ablaze. Hendrik reassures him, urging him to calm down and explaining that Jin Huk shares a similar background. Vulcan, curious, inquires if the Oni was acquainted with an Oni named Haru. The Oni, taken aback, questions how Vulcan knew Haru. Back at the elderly man's location, Jin Huk quietly recounts his encounter with Haru, prompting a sense of relief in the Oni upon hearing that Haru was alive. Hendrik, standing nearby, ponders internally how surprising it was that such a fortuitous coincidence had unfolded. The Oni recounts that that day marked the commencement of their village's traditional festival. Every Oni had ascended to the 100th floor, but due to his advanced age and illness, he had stayed behind. Tragically, that very night, his village was reduced to ashes. Anxiously, the Oni inquires about Haru's safety. Jin Huk reassures him, disclosing that Haru is currently on the 9th floor, and they would soon reunite with her. The Oni then notes the mask in Jin Huk's possession, and inquires if it belonged to Haru. Jin Huk confirms it, explaining that Haru had regarded it as her way of repaying him for saving her. Hendrik, curious about Haru's strength, asks Jin Huk, who affirms her prowess and adds that she is still growing, likely surpassing them in one-on-one battles. Hendrik inquires about Haru's status in Jin Huk's party, wondering if she was a temporary or permanent member. Jin Huk explains that he had embraced Haru's mask and committed to seeking vengeance alongside her. Gino, the Oni blacksmith, gratefully grasps Jin Huk's hand and introduces himself. He pledges to do everything within his power to support Jin Huk and implores them to rebuild the village with Haru. Jin Huk, slightly taken aback, responds, well, we should. Observing the scene, Vulcan muses internally about whether Jin Huk comprehends that accepting the mask is equivalent to accepting Haru's proposal. Gino generously offers all the weapons in his workshop. After inspecting the swords, Jin Huk notes their exceptional quality, surpassing those received from the Gold Lich. Hendrik clarifies that Gino is the finest Oni blacksmith, explaining the exceptional craftsmanship. Following this exchange, they decide to depart but find Gino peacefully asleep. Hendrik remarks that Gino appears to have finally relaxed upon learning of a survivor from his village, a rarity in his experience. Jin Huk suggests they leave Gino to rest and expresses his intention to bring Haru to meet him. As he observes the elderly man, Jin Huk inwardly anticipates that Haru would gain strength from this meeting and feels pleased. Suddenly, Vulcan urgently calls Jin Huk and warns him to be cautious. With quick reflexes, Jin Huk evades an attack from Hendrik. In response, he questions Hendrik's motives. Hendrik reminds him about their previous discussion, emphasizing that he had mentioned testing Jin Huk. Grinning, he warns that if Jin Huk isn't skilled enough to survive, he should abandon any notion of challenging the will of the gods. Jin Huk retorts, insisting that he will test Hendrik as well. Just as their conversation unfolds, nearby buildings begin to crumble, marking the onset of a fierce battle battle between Jinhook and Hendrik. As Jinhook dispatched his spectral warriors toward Hendrik, the latter swiftly drew his blade and cleaved those ethereal entities into countless fragments. Out of thin air, floating blades converged around Hendrik, poised to pierce him, but he thwarted their attempt by swinging his sword, recognizing it as shallow tricks. Unexpectedly, Jinhook materialized above Hendrik and launched an offensive with his blade. Yet Hendrik adeptly evaded the strike with a deft maneuver. Hendrik gripped Jinhook's hand and flung him onto a nearby house, leaving Miho anxious. Hendrik acknowledged Jinhook's title as a mage and necromancer, recognizing his remarkable dexterity, but cautioned that this trait could lead to a problem. Suddenly, Vulcan materialized behind Hendrik and ensnared him with his chains, questioning him about what he thinks about the first spirit master. Jinhook then unleashed a potent magic technique called Gungear, astonishing Hendrik as he claimed it to be his mightiest. Grinning, Jinhook exclaimed, "Kaya!" and launched arrows toward Hendrik. In response, Hendrik's sword reacted, forming intricate patterns which Vulcan recognized. Hendrik employed a skill known as Enchant Dispel Magic, severing the chains that bound him. Seeing this, Vulcan urgently instructed Jinhook to dodge. Hendrik unleashed another skill, Shattering Dragon Slash, intercepting and obliterating the arrow before advancing toward Jinhook. The ensuing impact caused a massive explosion. Vulcan, with concern in his voice, called out to Jinhook. Hendrik struck Vulcan with his sword, noting that Vulcan was Jinhook's most potent soldier, leaving him with nothing more to say as he closed in on Jinhook, proclaiming his impending defeat. Jinhook then appeared on the side of the house, calmly stating, "Nope." Holding a bow, he declared himself as the strongest one remaining. Jinhook aimed and shot a volley of small arrows toward Hendrik, but he completely missed him, prompting a retort from Hendrik about the stark contrast between Jinhook's swordsmanship and his archery skills, describing the latter as atrocious. However, the arrows took an unexpected turn, glowing with magic, and returned to pierce Hendrik, causing him to descend inwardly. Jinhook celebrated a critical hit and resolved to go all out to finish Hendrik. Donning his own mask, Jinhook mentioned that he had only previously brought out the side effects when using the mask with Haru, but now he intended to succeed. As he put on the mask, he harnessed his battle foresight. Hendrik's anger intensified, conjuring a colossal fire tornado at his location. Jinhook regretfully noted that he had missed his chance, and that Hendrik was not an easy foe to vanquish. Hendrik, now with a transformed countenance, laughed and acknowledged Jinhook's strength, asserting that he had lost in terms of numbers. He declared that the fight wasn't over, craving more. Hendrik unleashed his skill, charging Dragon Spark, urging Jinhook to continue the battle. Jinhook was left in disbelief, internally grappling with the realization that there seemed to be no way out. He could track Hendrik's attacks with his battle foresight, but he lacked the speed to evade them, and getting hit would prove fatal. With no alternative, Jinhook retrieved his fox mask, donning it and expressing his trust in it. He looked rather impressive with his new mask. The elderly man's eyes snapped open, his shock palpable as he beheld the havoc wrought by Jinhook and Hendrik. He bellowed, demanding to know what was happening, suspecting Hendrik's hand in it. In an instant, Miho sprang from her slumber and fled the house, leaving Garen in pursuit, shouting to her about the danger. As Miho gazed at a colossal beam of light, her apprehension was etched across her face. The source of the radiance was none other than Hendrik as he readied an attack known as the Charging Dragon Spark. He abruptly vanished, leaving Jinhook bewildered by his sudden disappearance. Out of nowhere, Hendrik reappeared before Jinhook, his sword perilously close to his face. A colossal explosion ensued, and when the dust cleared, it was evident that Jinhook had evaded Hendrik's assault. After the debris cleared, Hendrik was astounded to realize that Jinhook had miraculously evaded his devastating attack, causing him to secretly concede that this wasn't an assault that Jinhook's agility alone could evade. With serene poise, Jinhook materialized behind Hendrik, untouched by the confrontation. This left Hendrik pondering whether the enigmatic mask adorning Jinhook belonged to that mystical fox. Hendrik couldn't help but chuckle, questioning Jinhook's motives as he prepared to retaliate. Jinhook, however, equipped weapons similar to Wolverine's and lunged at Hendrik, their blades clashing in a tense showdown. Countless clashes ensued between them, their weapons clashing and sparking in a flurry of combat. Abruptly, Hendrik burst into laughter, complimenting Jinhook's enhanced mobility and newfound strength, pondering aloud whether the mystical fox mask was the source of this transformation. In response, Jinhook maintained an unwavering silence, his eyes carefully scanning for an opportunity. Seizing a perceived weakness, he lunged forward to strike, but soon realized that Hendrik had deliberately created this opening to deploy his magic. Hendrik's sorcery triggered a powerful explosion where Jinhook had stood moments ago. Astonishingly, Jinhook emerged from the settling dust unscathed, poised in a defensive stance with an intense gaze. He attempted to employ the charm skill on Hendrik. However, Hendrik swiftly shattered the charm and quipped, "I don't swing that way," a chuckle following as he explained that such spells could be easily broken with a bit of focus. Suddenly, Jin Huk materialized in front of Hendrik, retorting, "But you'd have to stop moving for a moment." Internally, Jin Huk resolved not to employ a weak weapon and decided to conclude the confrontation with a decisive attack. He announced his intention to employ the Gung Hun skill, combining it with all master martial combat, Fox's mobility, and various enchantments such as enhanced physical strength, spirit power, demonic energy, and divine power. As he readied a punch, he informed Hendrik that this would be the end, concluding with a taunting remark and unleashing the Choi Gang Hun technique, a straight jab with a mighty shove. Jin Huk propelled Hendrik, unleashing a cataclysmic explosion that laid waste to numerous buildings. Amid the debris, Vulcan struggled to regain his footing, questioning whether he had lost consciousness and pondering the outcome of the battle between Jin Huk and Hendrik. His attention was abruptly drawn to Cha Jin Huk, standing as if he had emerged victorious, blood trickling from Jin Huk's eyes and mouth as he began to stagger, prompting Vulcan to call out his name with deep concern. Internally, Jin Huk acknowledged that he had expended all his strength, rendering his body immobile. He regretted not finishing Hendrik with his last attack, especially since Hendrik remained standing before him, far from defeated. Hendrik, visibly battered and fatigued, informed Jin Huk that he had passed. However, Jin Huk's irritation flared, and he rebuked Hendrik, asserting that he had failed. He emphasized that deploying a final move should render one incapacitated, all while dubbing Hendrik a monster. Hendrik, seemingly perturbed, raised a contemplative finger to his chin, expressing annoyance while saying, "To think that Jin Huk would fail him while looking like that." Abruptly, Hendrik relented with a begrudging, "Fine," announcing his intent to determine Jin Huk's fate after unleashing his ultimate assault. He reasoned that he had taken a liking to Jin Huk, so he needed to pass no matter what. Jin Huk, however, implored him to hold off as his body refused to respond. Yet Hendrik remained undeterred, preparing to execute his flower dragon attack. As the formidable assault closed in on Jin Huk, he acquiesced with a resigned, "Fine, you pass," and in his last breath, he hurled an expletive at Hendrik, branding him a fucking bastard, just as the attack made its devastating impact. The scene shifts to a comical exchange between Jin Huk and Vulcan inside the elderly gentleman's abode. Vulcan teased Jin Huk for his loss, but Jin Huk retorted, claiming that Vulcan had lost as well. Vulcan reminded Jin Huk of the promise he made to Hendrik about testing him. Jin Huk, wrapped in bandages, grew increasingly irritated with Vulcan and threatened to turn him into a spirit orb. However, his attempt was met with excruciating pain, causing him to halt, and Vulcan couldn't help but giggle, remarking, "Serves you right," while sporting a broad grin. Vulcan pointed out that he had cautioned Jin Huk not to go overboard, emphasizing that Jin Huk owed his continued existence to meeting Uriel and attaining divine power. Jin Huk playfully referred to Vulcan as an old man, further infuriating him. Clearly irked, Jin Huk challenged Vulcan to wait and see what would happen once he recovered, all while Vulcan continued to chuckle and dismissed Jin Huk's frustration as the cries of a loser. Suddenly, Hendrik swung open the door and entered the room, inquiring about Jin Huk's well-being. Vulcan began to sweat profusely, recalling Hendrik's previous threat to slice him to pieces. Awkwardly, Vulcan offered an apology for his earlier actions. Hendrik responded with a smirk, reassuring Vulcan that it was all right since they were all in the same boat now. Vulcan, visibly relieved, stammered out his gratitude and inwardly noted the stark contrast between Hendrik's demeanor in a fight against Jin Huk and his normal composed self. Vulcan then expressed remorse for the trouble Hendrik had gone through to check on Jin Huk. Hendrik inquired if he had gone a little overboard. Jin Huk, still reeling from being called Lil Broad, exploded, challenging both of them to face him in a fight, convinced he'd win next time. Inwardly, Hendrik acknowledged that Jin Huk would indeed be capable of defeating him one day. After taking a deep breath, Jin Huk calmed down and revealed the reason he had summoned Hendrik. He wanted to hear Hendrik's story, particularly about his past life and death. Hendrik began by recounting how his family and hometown had vanished mysteriously, courtesy of the dragons. His miraculous survival was attributed to his burning hatred for dragons. He proceeded to climb the tower just like other climbers, but he was fortunate to possess exceptional talent. Jin Huk noted the similarity between Hendrik's history and that of someone else he knew. Hendrik divulged that he had slain his first dragon on the 600th floor and subsequently embarked on a journey of revenge. Jin Huk remarked on the quick progress to the 600th floor, wondering if Hendrik then went on to confront the four royalties. Hendrik confirmed this, but mentioned that it also marked the commencement of a pursuit by a team dispatched by the four royalties. This pursuit became his daily routine, and as he grew stronger, the penalty lessened. He revealed that their branch on the 800th floor had essentially been wiped out. Inwardly, Jin Huk explained that the penalty system was designed to prevent high-level climbers from monopolizing the tower, imposing restrictions on their abilities on lower floors rather than the higher ones they'd reached. This was why he'd survived Gold Lich's attack. If there wasn't a penalty, he would have died from one attack. He asked Hendrik about the highest floor he had reached, and Hendrik replied, 900th floor. It was on that floor that his plan ultimately met its demise. Jin Huk realized that Hendrik could have become a transcendent, result. Hendrik continued his tale, explaining that a more formidable pursuit team under the 4 royalties had been dispatched to capture him, and he eventually succumbed to their numbers. He became like this, he said. Hendrik found it ironic that among the myriad species, he had reincarnated into the body of a dragon. He desired death, but couldn't easily achieve it in such a powerful form, so he accepted it, vowing to use this body as a tool for his revenge. Jin-Huk replied with a smirk. Yeah, that sounds like you. Hendrik, eager to get started, asked when they should begin climbing. However, he suddenly recalled that Jin-Huk had mentioned waiting for Haru. Jin-Huk, looking puzzled, inquired whether Hendrik intended to join them in climbing the tower. With a playful grin, Hendrik quipped, "Where would I go after leaving you, weakling?" making Jin-Huk more pissed off. Hendrik then asserted that he and Jin-Huk were remarkably similar because they both had faced their last moments alone in their previous lives, marred by failure. They needed to learn from these experiences, and it would be foolish to believe they could face their challenges alone. Jin-Huk nodded in agreement, recognizing the need for a friend and ally, someone from their bloodline to stand by their side. Hendrik then made a surprising proposition, suggesting that Jin-Huk should create a guild. Jin-Huk, taken aback, stammered, "A guild?" Meanwhile, in the guild house on the 600th floor's Holy Kingdom, a woman expressed her frustration and inquired about the commotion. She opened the door and turned to Kane, asking him what was happening. Kane gazed at the flames that Jin-Huk had ignited on the 10th floor and casually diverted her attention, mentioning an intriguing report from the White Swallow branch on the 10th floor. He explained that the branch had been reduced to rubble by a single individual, leaving her in shock. Kane elaborated, noting that according to Beck Helio's report, it didn't appear to be the work of an ordinary organization or guild. Her surprise deepened, and she asserted, "Impossible." She pointed out that even on a lower-level floor like the 10th, the penalty placed restrictions on one's strength, making it seemingly impossible for someone to accomplish such a feat. Kane snapped his fingers in agreement, adding that even 9 stars like them found it impossible to conquer a guild house after receiving the 10th floor penalty. This indicated that the person responsible had already acquired immense power, much like them when they first entered the tower. The girl fell silent for a moment, and Kane suggested that it was still a possibility. She inquired about their course of action if such an individual truly existed. With a sly grin, Kane proposed employing the same method they had used 10 years ago, eliminating them all. Kane's plan involved hiring a skilled bounty hunter for the task. In another scene, a blonde girl was depicted defeating a massive snake, casually remarking that she'd completed another task for the day.